January 2026. I hope everyone is well. Attendance. All 8 Cabinet members are in attendance. So I don't believe there are any apologies. So that's item 2 done away with, no apologies. Item 3 then is declarations of interest. Delith, anything to note here?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, my advice is you should consider declaring a personal interest if you have a close personal associate who works or attends a school Gwyn Lliw, or if you're a school governor, and that's in relation to agenda item 8. Also, my advice is you should consider declaring personal interest if you have any association with T. George Lansbury or T. Cainant, and that's in relation to agenda item number 9. Now, I haven't been made aware of any interest. I'm happy to assist if you have any queries. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything to declare then? If anything does come up during the meeting, then just signal and I'll bring you in. That brings us then to agenda item 4, which is the minutes from the Cabinet meeting on the 25th of November of last year. Is everyone happy with those? Okay, I'll take those as agreed then. Item 5 is the minutes from the Cabinet meeting on the 9th of December. Is everyone happy with those? Yep. Okay, I'll take those as agreed. Which takes on to item 6, which is the action sheet. There are no actions outstanding. Item 7 then is the financial monitoring 25-26 and revenue budget 26-27 report. So if I just give Rob a second to move down onto the lectern. Okay. Come in.
Okay, morning all, thank you, Leader. So the report for you today is our latest financial update. It covers the in-year revenue monitoring position, the in-year capital monitoring position, and gives an update on our budget planning for 26-27, mainly following the provisional settlement announcement in late November, and also the more recent announcement around the Senedd budget deal. So it just gives an updated position in terms of what that means for us and the next steps from here to setting the budget in March. So, just starting with the in-year position, so that's in section 4 of the report. So you can see from the table at paragraph 4.1, we're now forecasting a favourable variance of 151,000. That compares to an adverse variance that we were forecasting at month 6. So that's month 6 compared with month 7. So obviously a really positive movement between months. Perhaps not unexpected. I think we always had reasonable confidence that that would happen as the year progressed. But the main reason it's happened perhaps quicker than anticipated is because we have received some Welsh Government funding in connection with the pay award, the NJC pay award for this year, which wasn't anticipated. And that has quite quickly turned the position to where it is today. We're positive that it will hopefully improve further between now and the end of the year, unless, of course, there was a major sort of pressure emerging that right now we aren't aware of. In terms of the variances to draw your attention to, within children and families, no variance really to draw your attention to, but other than to reiterate the fact that the service is still living within the transition funding that was made available for the year, actually comfortably so at the moment. At the moment we're only anticipating using 635,000 of the 1.9 million that was set aside for that purpose. So obviously that's a really positive position to report, and also gives some headroom should there be an increase in numbers or cost of placements between now and the end of the year. But everything currently is on track in terms of that 2-year transition plan. In terms of adults, you've seen paragraph 4.2.3, just outlines the main pressure there relating to the farm. We've obviously covered in the past why that's the pressure in this particular year. Hopefully that's just a one-off in this year, however. Within neighbourhoods and environment, you'll see there's a pressure in terms of recycling and waste, and it breaks down there the sort of areas that covers in terms of agency staff, plant repairs and recyclates income. Resources, there's an underspend of around 150k in terms of staff vacancies, and obviously staff vacancies is generally a recurring theme across all directorates, unless there's any particular pressures. The other one, just to touch on that particular page of the report, is around housing benefit subsidy. We're still carrying a pressure there. However, it has reduced from the month 6 positions. That was the other main movement between months. So we're now looking at an in-year pressure of 178,000 due to the fact that we can't recover full subsidy on certain temporary accommodation costs in the main. and then we move on then to centrally held budgets, and that's where the grant funding that we've had notification of comes into play. So that 453,000 there. And like I said, that's the main reason for the movement between months. Just turning to the next page, 4.3.1 gives an overview of mitigations. So overall, we're projecting that 93% of mitigations are expected to be achieved in full, and the residual 7% are either due to be achieved or something that will factor into our considerations around next year's budget. So overall, in terms of revenue, it's a positive position, clearly. Obviously, if that was to continue to improve and we end up with a bigger underspend at year end, then we'll give consideration around reserve transfers and where best to place that money. But ultimately, that will boost our financial resilience, which is clearly positive. Moving on to capital, which is section 5 of the report. So there's a table there that just gives an overview of the budgetary position and the forecast for capital. So you can see, as is often the case, there's quite a bit of movement from the budget we started with to the budget we're now working to, largely because we have so many grant additions during the year, as and when grant funding is either applied for and successfully awarded, or all 22 authorities are in receipt of something that Welsh Government have decided to distribute. So our 28.6 million budget that we started with is now 38.5. That's having added a significant number of additions, but then also we've done some reprofiling to take that budget from 53.8 back down to 38.5. We are forecasting full spend against that budget, although we are realistic in knowing that, that there may well be some more slippage to be reported between now and the end of the year, particularly given the percentage spend we're looking at the moment, which is more like 40%, obviously more than halfway through the year. The report, I won't go into details, but gives some overview in terms of where those additions have come from. But just give a couple of examples. There's been an SBF allocation for the Cumbrian High School 3G pitch, and there's been money for highways and coal tips, and a number of other awards. It also gives an overview of where the slippage is. Obviously, slippage doesn't mean the money's lost, it just simply means it's been put forward into future years. So no major concern in terms of the funding, but obviously, the quicker those schemes are delivered, the better in terms of outcomes. So there's not pretty much else to say on capital in terms of that. Financial standing is broadly where it was when we most recently reported that, which was at month 4. We're still projecting to be well within our approved levels for the general fund, so that's positive. And the school's position also is largely where it was, but it's important to note that that is a better projected position than it was at the point that Governor approved budgets were agreed for the year. Obviously, financial resilience is something we keep a close watch on. Particularly with individual schools. There are schools that are either in deficit positions or close to, so obviously we give additional support to those as required. So that's the in-year position. Turning to 26-27, as I said, that the main updates are around the settlement announcement, but then the subsequent announcement of the Senate budget deal. So focusing on the latter, because that's the more recent update. It's been announced that all local authorities will receive an average uplift of 4.5%, but a minimum of 4%. So every authority will get at least 4%. So we're working on 4.5 as our modelling assumption, our updated modelling assumption. We're hoping that we'll receive our final settlement and a specific confirmation of our funding very swiftly after the Welsh Government final budget, which is due next Tuesday. And obviously at that point we'll know precisely what we're getting. But everything that we've modelled in this report is based on an assumption around 4.5% of that average figure. It's important to note that when we had the provisional settlement announcement, even though it was a lower average figure, we were above average, so we would hope that that would continue to be the case. So hopefully 4.5% is the minimum that we would receive for 26-27. So on that 4.5%, that would be an overall cash increase year on year of 8.6 million, but more critically, an increase of 3.8 million compared to what we were originally assuming. So that's clearly positive. In terms of specific grants, there's a number that have been transferred into the settlement, and they total just over 4 million, so that's over and above the kind of like-for-like uplift. But a number of those, all of them we are receiving in the year, and they're largely covering costs that we're already incurring. So it's simply just ensuring that funding continues into the new year. But you can see there the breakdown: teachers' pay, NJC pay, and the largest one being national insurance contributions on the employer's side, and a couple of other sort of minor amounts as well. In terms of specific grants, there's nothing that sort of leaps out saying there's a big cut on any specific grants. As usual, we don't have the individual local authority detail at this stage, just the All Wales position. but hopefully no major concerns there on specific grants. And just in terms of capital, there's a fairly marginal increase of 119,000 in our general capital grant for next year. There's also a comment there around the extended producer responsibility, which is paragraph 7.2. It's just to confirm that we're making the assumption that funding will continue. We've received it, or are in the process of receiving it for the first time in this financial year. The paragraph outlines the reason for that funding, what it's intended to cover. So what will most likely happen is that will displace some of our own funding. We are using it to cover things like the education enforcement team, but the general working assumption is that any excess of that funding, or the funding that it displaces and therefore releases, will be sort of earmarked for the forthcoming capital scheme around waste transfer stations. So just to give a reference there, there'll be more on that in the final budget reports. So in terms of what that means, so when we last brought a report to Cabinet, we were talking about a residual budget gap of 2.5 million. And just above, in section 7.3, is a table that just sets out the movements in terms of how we got to 2.5 million. So then there's been an opportunity to review the estimates off the back of that. So there's been some positive adjustments, and they're listed in 7.4. They total 630,000, and obviously we've had the funding update as well. So jump into 7.5. There's a table there that gives the updated position post-funding announcement. So basically flip from a 2.5 million gap to a 2.5 million surplus. So that obviously gives an opportunity to consider what to do with that surplus. So some thoughts have been given around increasing resilience and de-risking the budget, similar to what we did this stage last year. At the top of page 41 of the pack, we've got a table there setting out 3 suggested measures for increasing resilience and de-risking the budget. One around the pay award, so just giving a little bit more allowance if the final pay award was to exceed our 3% assumption. One around the pay and grading structure, and this is to do with the bottom end of the pay and grading structure. It references the fact that because of living wage increases being generally, well not generally, but almost consistently above the rate of other pay awards, it leads to a compression of the pay spine at the bottom end. So there's some money put there to address that and remove or try and relieve that compression as much as possible. And then there's a smaller amount identified for mitigations that we've currently got in the current year. It says there about being difficult to achieve digital and energy savings. It's not so much that they're difficult to achieve, it's more that they're difficult to extract. So it's not to say that money hasn't been saved on either of those two, but they sort of get absorbed within the wider position. So the point there being that even if or where savings have been achieved, we can't count them twice. So if they've already been built into the initial estimates or they're part of a school's funding, we can't then take them again. So that's all that's referenced in there. It's not to say that things haven't been achieved. It's more the fact they're difficult to isolate and extract. So taking all that into consideration, 7.7 just outlines that it basically would leave a residual amount of just in excess of £1 million. But obviously, if our final settlement is better than 4.5%, then that figure would naturally grow a little bit. So the next steps then are to obviously determine how that will be used. And ultimately, the intention is to reflect that in the scrutiny papers for the upcoming cross-cutting scrutiny meeting in February. Also, there'll be some public consultation activity in line with that, as would normally be the case. Section 8 outlines the risks. I don't think there's anything major to draw your attention to there, so I won't go into that in any great detail. And then Section 9 outlines the next steps, and it's the usual thing of all the meeting dates that are coming up now over the coming couple of months, ultimately building to Council on the 3rd of March. So I think that covers everything I wanted to touch on in the report. Obviously, the recommendations are set out in paragraph 12. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions before I come in? Sue.
Just to ensure I'm reading correctly, that the level of reserves that we're now with seem to you to still be prudent and at a level that is sustainable. Potentially some potential to replenish reserves from the future settlement.
Yeah, I think, although there is a drop-off in reserves, shown in this report, I think it's important to recall that we've obviously bolstered reserves a lot over recent years as well because of the favourable in-year positions we've had. I think, overall, we're not unduly concerned about the reserves position. they're not all fully committed, and critically, the general fund is not fully committed. You know, there's a balanced forecast there of 9.2 million. That exceeds our kind of calculated minimum level that we feel we should have. So yeah, generally speaking, we're okay with that. I suppose naturally one of the ones to keep an eye on is school balances, because although in totality it's a positive figure, clearly, you know, individual schools can get into difficulty, and that's a situation to avoid, because ultimately when it gets too bad, it can impact the wider council finances. But yeah, at the moment it's clearly a net positive position there as well. So yeah, I think overall we're okay. And obviously, as I said, if at the end of this financial year we have a favourable position, which we're hopeful we will, then naturally that will flow into reserves as well. So we'll ultimately address that, or equally reduce the requirement to draw upon the reserves that we're currently assuming we'll draw on. So either way, it has the same impact. The reserves should be healthier than we're currently forecasting, as long as no major surprises emerge. Thanks.
That's always a balancing act, isn't it? To get the reserves high enough to be prudent, but low enough to, you know, to utilise whatever money we can, and we'll continue to do that. Can I just welcome the improved position, both in year and for 2026-27, and thank you to everyone involved in that, both within finance and within the departments, for your hard work. I think that calm, collective approach that we have across the council is one that puts us in a good position. So thank you to Rob, to Andrew, and to all the people in the departments who contribute to that. I think that gives us a solid basis to move forwards on. I look forward to the scrutiny sessions later this month and next month, to the constructive challenge and engagement I know they'll give, and to add value there as well. And I just want to say in summary, I just welcome that prudent approach that we take. We've refused as a council to play fast and loose with the long-term future of services and their funding in order to gain short-term popularity, and I think that's the approach we should continue to take. It's possible for councils to do things that may seem good at the time, but if they endanger the future funding of those services, then it would be a betrayal of the generations that follow us. So we're really keen to continue to take that approach and to be deeply prudent in any way we can, whilst obviously managing services as best as we can, investing in our communities, and also, you know, keeping bills down as much as we can for people too. So just like to welcome the balanced approach that we take. Any other questions before we move to the recommendations? The recommendations are at paragraph 12.1. It's recommended that Cabinet firstly notes the updated financial forecast for 2025-26. Secondly, notes the settlement announcements as they affect the Council. Thirdly, endorses, subject to scrutiny, the proposals detailed within this report for their inclusion in the final 2026-27 budget proposals, which will be considered by Council in March. And fourthly, notes the timetable for the remainder of the 2026-27 budget setting process. Have a show of hands in favour. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Rob, for the report, and to you, Andrew, and Dave and others for all the work on it. Okay, that brings us then to agenda item 8, which is the proposal for the new Welsh medium additional learning needs learning resource base. And shall I hand over initially to Richard on this?
Just rolls off the tongue, leader, doesn't it? Bless it. Many of you will be aware that the service has reviewed ALN throughout the county borough, and the provision has been extended. This item follows the identification of Welsh medium provision, where currently students who would normally go to Welsh medium school are having their ALN needs dealt with in an English-speaking environment. This just isn't appropriate, and we've now sourcing 10 spaces at YGG, a new learning resource base, which initially will be primary level until the secondary needs are determined, and then can be expanded within the 10. I'm not promising extra spaces at this point, but expanded within the 10. And should there be surplus places, we can offer neighbouring authorities the option to buy in. It does have a win-win situation, because in providing Welsh language places, those that I've already referred to that are in English-speaking bases could then attend YGG, and then freeing up provision in the English-speaking basis. As this is a new learning resource base, we do have to go out to consultation, which, subject to your approval, can take place today. And if I've left anything for John to comment on, he will do so now.
No, I think that's an excellent attempt, Councillor Clark. Only perhaps to add that this follows the normal process for a statutory consultation, which you're familiar with, although we haven't actually had to carry one out for some time. I think it's a number of years since we had to do a statutory consultation. So we'll, with your permission today, go out to consult, bring back something back in February, March. And at that point, Cabinet decides whether or not we proceed to the statutory objection period, at the end of which a decision will be made about the proposal. And that's really all we need to say. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, colleagues? I would just like to welcome this report. Sometimes these issues are played out quite divisively in certain fora, but for me this isn't a divisive issue at all. This is about providing for children with additional learning needs, and that's something that we know is in great demand at the moment, and I believe we should do all we can to provide for those children in whatever language they choose to be taught in and whatever language their parents choose to have them educated in. So this is a welcome step that I believe will free up capacity elsewhere, and also believe will enable those children to have that support within a Welsh medium setting. So I welcome the report, and I'd like to thank Richard and John and everyone who's been involved in bringing it forwards. Any other questions? If not, the recommendations are at paragraph 8 of the report. It's recommended that Cabinet approves commencement of the statutory consultation process on the proposed creation of a new Welsh medium additional learning needs resource base at Ysgol Gymraeg Gwynllw. Are we happy to approve that? That's approved unanimously. Thank you, John. Thank you, Richard. That then brings us on to agenda item 9, which is the award of contract report for the older persons extra care schemes. And bring in Dave initially on this.
Thanks, Chair. It's a pretty straightforward report, but it seeks to get Cabinet approval for the award of the new contract for care and support for T. George Lansbury and T. Hynant, two of Torvine's two older persons extra care schemes. Both schemes provide vital services that enable older people to maintain independence whilst receiving tailored support within these communities. With the current contracts ending in March 2026, an open tender process was undertaken to identify a provider capable of delivering high-quality, person-centred care aligned with the Council's priorities. And I'm once again proud to say that we've placed greater emphasis on quality and social benefit over price. Our continued commitment to quality services put residents at the heart of this decision today. I'm joined here by Richard Williams, who's on the call. He's our commissioning officer, who will be taking questions, and also by Eunice Jones, who's the commissioning group manager, who's also on hand to take any more technical questions around the process that we followed. We won't be able to go into, as you'd expect, we won't be able to go into any detail about the tenders at this point, because there is a period at which we have to wait until we can reveal who the successful bidder is. So I'll hand over to Richard, who will take us through the report in a bit greater detail. I mean, it's quite straightforward in a sense, really. So, Rich?
Yeah, thanks, David. As David said, I'll run through the report. I mean, David's mentioned certain aspects of it anyway, which I'll be repeating. But from the start, the purpose of the report is to award care and support contracts at the two extra care schemes, both based in located in the Cwmbran area, and they both offer similar extra care services. The current provider there is Radis. And they provide the hours services specified under 3.3 in the report, and at the moment they are delivered under two distinct separate contracts. Following a service review in 2025, the middle of 2025, Decision was made to make adjustments to the service model by reducing the core commitment at T George Lansbury from 280 hours per week, that's 280 day hours per week, to 224 hours per week, but increasing the day commitment from 112 hours during the day at T Kainan to 168 hours. Just to note that night provision at both schemes and the activity support, the amount of activity support that we commission there will remain the same. And I mean, there's obviously a slight change in the model here, but that won't result in any overall reduction in services received by the tenants at schemes. Moving on, under 4 issues and findings, as it says there, in June 2025, an open tender exercise was commenced, and it was carried out by our procurement partner, Ardal, based linked to Cardiff Council, and the tender was based on, as it usually is, there's no real change here, it's based on price submission and a quality submission. So the way it was structured was 40% was linked to price, 50% linked to a quality evaluation, and 10% linked to a social value evaluation. Quality criteria, the questions are listed there in the report, but included questions and also a presentation. And the social value criteria were linked to specific outcomes and measures, again listed in the report. Moving on to the results of the tender exercise, and as it outlines, tenderer A scored better on price and quality, whereas tenderer B scored better on the social value measures. However, it's important to note that both submissions scored highly in all areas, and the evaluation panel was confident in both providers' ability to deliver the services to a high standard at the scheme. Just a note on the financial implications, and they were that the tender exercise did produce actually an overall saving based on current costs. So just moving on to the recommendation, and it is that the officers recommend that Cabinet awards the care and support contract to tenderer A.
Great. Thank you. Any questions, colleagues? If not, are we happy? Oh, David?
I mean, it's not a question. I mean, it's just taking the opportunity to say I'm really proud that we offer this service as well, because I think it's for individuals for whom residential care isn't the right place to be, or nursing care isn't the right place to be. It's that sort of middle ground, and also where staying in their own home isn't right either. So it's offering a diversity of choice, which I think the more that we can do, the better, really, because I think that we say that we want to cater to what people tell us they want out of life, and this is very much what that looks like. So really proud that we can offer this, really, because it offers a more tailored, more kind of close to the wishes of people that we can get. So yeah, I just didn't want to pass it by and make sure that I say it shouldn't be understated that we offer this in the first place, really.
Sure, I guess that's key as well, to supporting people and helping keep them independent if they would rather live in a supported way in their own home. Okay, and I very much welcome that emphasis on quality and social value over price alone as well in the report. So is everyone happy to move to the recommendations? They're at paragraph 8. It's recommended that the contract for care and support services at T George Lansbury and T Kainan Extra Care Schemes be awarded to tenderer A, as they scored the highest in price and quality following the recent open tender exercise. And secondly, it's recommended that tenderer B be held as first reserve if for any reason that tenderer A withdraws, as they are also considered available to deliver the contract. But we have a show of hands in favour. That's carried unanimously. Thank you to Richard and to Dave as well, and to Eunice too for being here. That moves us on then to agenda item 10, which is the exclusion of press and public. I'm required to read out the statements. It's the motion to agree the exclusion of press and public from the meeting as the report is not for publication because in accordance with paragraph 14 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Access to Information Variation Wales Order 2007, it contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, and the public interest in maintaining these exemptions outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Are we happy to proceed? Show of hands? Yep. Okay.